Hey, what's up, you guys? Swan here from Swan Thinks. Now, it's been a long time since I last posted, but I've been focusing all my time and energy on my day job, which has been super exhausting. And what little time I had outside of work, I decided to put into some crypto and stock trading and research and a little bit of me time so that I don't go crazy working all the time. Speaking of which, this month marks the end of 5 years since I first started working. And since I'm a bit of a finance nerd who tracks every single penny I ever earn and spend, I thought why not share my journey here? After all, this is a channel dedicated to the FIRE movement, or Financial Independence Retire Early. So in this video, I'll be sharing you my 5-year financial progress in real numbers. I'm quite nervous to share this, to be quite honest, but I am passionate about sharing what I've learned along the way, and my journey is part of that. So I thought why not just be transparent about it? So without further ado, let's begin. Before I share my own finances, I do want to highlight that finances are really personal to someone's circumstances. There will always be people with more and those with a lot less. So it's better to focus on your own journey and not compare yourself to others. Comparison is the thief of joy, they say. However, I'll be honest to admit that I come from a very privileged upbringing. My parents were kind enough to pay for my education, and they were also kind enough to let me drive the family car, which means that I was able to start my journey debt free, which I am super thankful for. Other than that, I'm pretty much on my own. I don't stay with family, but these two factors really gave me a boost in my journey. So, with that out of the way, let's get into the numbers, which I've divided into four sections: expenses, income streams, my portfolio allocation, and of course, net worth. So to start things off, let's look at my expenses. Now, just for a bit of context, when I first started working, I was paid what I thought was a pretty decent salary for a fresh graduate, which was 3,600 ringgit a month before deductions. It was a management training program with a government-linked company, and I worked not in the finance industry but as an R&D chemist in the glove industry. Honestly, I really loved my job. It was super challenging, the projects were really interesting, the people were nice, and I ended up staying there for a good 4 years. For my first year of working, I was pretty frugal, if I do say so myself. I spent an average of 2,250 ringgit a month, and 78% of that was spent on top four categories, which are family, transportation, rent, and food. I gave my parents money out of the tradition of filial piety. They don't ask for it and they don't necessarily need the money, but I'm happy to do it. As for transportation, even though I drove the family car, it is an oil drinking machine, and so most of this cost came from petrol and toll that goes to and from work, which comes up to about 400 ringgit a month. As for housing, I shared rent with four other housemates, which came up to about 440 ringgit a month, which is pretty decent considering the place came fully furnished and the amenities were super nice. Utilities, on the other hand, came up to nearly 120 ringgit a month, which included internet, electricity, and phone bill. On top of that, the most amazing thing is my food bill, which is only 400 ringgit a month, which comes out to be about 4 ringgit and 40 cents per meal. It was a lot of meal prepping and job fun, and I never really ate out, nor did I buy any drinks, which saved me a lot of money. Other than these necessities, I spent less than 400 ringgit a month on all other items, for example, household, lifestyle, charity, and gifts. The rest of my income went to building up my 6-month emergency fund, which took me a little bit less than half a year, which I consider quite quick because I already had 4,000 ringgit saved up from part-time job in my uni days. Even though I was pretty disciplined in my first year, the next 2 years were not great. I was going through some personal issues and honestly ended up pretty depressed. So much so that I ended up going to therapy, which was super expensive and honestly not very helpful. So that only lasted a while. As a result, I pretty much neglected my finances and my spending increased by 60% in 2018 and another 11% in 2019 just because I couldn't be bothered to keep on top of things. On top of that, of course, my car decided to break down multiple times throughout those 2 years, which meant that I shelled out nearly 10,000 ringgit to get it fixed over multiple services. Luckily, though, I chose to distract myself with work, so I still managed to get a promotion with a pay raise, and that pretty much offset how much I was spending at the time. By early 2019, though, I realized I've been spending more money than I earned in certain months. So I decided to lock myself out of my money by increasing my EPF contributions from 11% to 18%, so that I'm forced to save automatically without having to think about it. It wasn't until the end of 2019 that I decided to make a couple of big changes that really turned things around. First of all, I chose to move to a new place so that I no longer had to share a living space with strangers, even though it meant paying nearly double the rent. Next, I also chose to put all my focus to achieve performance targets at work, which came with a pretty generous bonus. I also took on a more active interest in my investments, whereas before this, I was pretty much outsourcing my investment decisions to unit trusts. But honestly, nothing helped me more than getting my dog. There's something about the responsibility of taking care of such an innocent creature that depends on you completely to make you forget about what troubles you. She really pulled me out of my depression, which is why I spoil her so much. And ever since then, it's been a much smoother journey. I found myself back on track not just in my career and finances, but in my personal life as well. I was fortunate enough to keep my job during the pandemic and even took a leap of faith in making a career switch to a job that gave me far more challenges and responsibilities. I'm glad to say that I am in a much better position now than I was in 2018, and I just feel very thankful. Fast forward to today, even though my spending has more than doubled compared to when I first started working, I try my best to spend it on things that are either meaningful to me or save me time. My food budget is ridiculous, but I really enjoy cooking and trying new dishes, so I allow myself to splurge there. My rent is also higher, obviously, but I'm really glad I moved out because the lockdown was much easier having the whole place to myself. As for transportation, even though I'm driving the family car, the road tax is a killer and she occasionally breaks down, which means the cost is quite high. I also spend more on household gadgets and even hired an hourly maid to help out with chores twice a month, which saves me so much time. And of course, I spend a lot of time and money pampering Tofu, which is completely worth it. Lastly, since my income has grown considerably, I decided to increase my budget for gifts for friends and family, as well as donations to charity, which goes to animal shelters, aid to refugees, and contributions to those affected by the pandemic. Other than that, I don't really spend any money on wants. And that, my friends, is a complete breakdown of my expenses for the past 5 years. In the next section, I'll be going through my income sources. Overall, I have three income sources from my day job, side hustle, and passive income from investments. When I first started out, I still did some remote work for the company I had worked for part time in my university days. So that made up about 10% of my overall income, and I also had a small amount of passive income coming in from my small investments. This was pretty much the same in 2018, but by 2019, I had stopped my side hustle due to depression. 2020 was similar, but it was a good year to invest, which is why passive income went up. And now, 3 quarters into 2021, my side hustles have started to pick up again, but the biggest contribution comes from passive income from my investments, which account for nearly 20% of my overall income. This is mostly because I've been managing my investments more actively, but mostly because the markets were doing well, so perhaps more luck than skill. Moving on to my investment portfolio, it's pretty difficult to track it over time because I make changes to it so frequently. So I'll only be showing my latest portfolio allocation as of September 2021. I like to divide my investments into three portions, which are passive, semi active, and active holdings. Passively managed just means that I don't trade actively or I outsource the trading activities to a third party. So these would be things like my EPF, money market funds with Versa, EPF members investment scheme, and PRS, which are essentially unit trusts, and of course robo advisors like Stashaway, which I dollar cost average into every single month. For these passive investments, everything is automated through direct debit, so I only keep an eye on them maybe once or twice a year. The only reason why unit trusts are still part of my portfolio is because the PRS gives you a tax deduction and EPF member investment scheme just allows me to diversify my savings away from the Malaysian market. I'm sorry, Malaysia, but things are kind of falling apart. For the semi-active category, it's pretty much direct ETF investments, and most of these are in US-based ETFs. It's semi-active because I don't do dollar cost averaging, and I do pick and choose the ETFs, as well as use some simple technical analysis to time my entry. And finally, 38% of my portfolio is actively managed, and these will be 27% in Rakuten Trade for local stocks, as well as 10% in cryptocurrencies on Luno and a platform that rhymes with finance. The reason why I still include a substantial portion of active management is because one, I thoroughly enjoy researching and trading stocks and crypto. I learn a lot about the economy, businesses, and money in general, so even if I don't beat the market, I still get a lot out of the attempt. Second, I generally have a higher risk appetite, and there's no better time to take risks than when you're young and have plenty of years ahead to recover from any mistakes. And so I generally take higher risk trades in order to try to beat the market. It doesn't always work, of course, but I'm still willing to try. As for why I invest in the Malaysian market instead of the more lucrative US markets is down to familiarity and time difference. I won't pretend to know much about US stocks, and I don't really have the passion or the time to put in the research. On top of that, it's easier for me to keep up with local news and the political and economic shifts because, well, I live in Malaysia. Although I will say that the latest developments are really enticing me to shift my money outside of Malaysia, which I probably will do in the coming months. Although actively managed, I don't really trade all that often and hold less than 15 stocks in total, most of them held for long-term gains and some of them for medium-term trades. As for cryptocurrency, I've done a lot of research and trading since the crash of May, and it has paid off quite handsomely. I'll confess I'm pretty bullish on crypto long term, and I do plan to increase my allocation to cryptocurrencies if and when the opportunity arises. Not investment advice. Finally, looking back at my net worth growth for the past 5 years, I'll admit my journey was a relatively smooth one. Thanks to my parents, I was able to start my journey without any debt, but other than that, my net worth was accumulated through a combination of diligent saving, working towards higher income levels, and slowly but surely, those compounding interests from my investments are starting to add up. In the end, I surpassed my 5-year net worth target at just over 266,000 ringgit this September, and I'm quite satisfied with the progress so far. As for the future, I'll be continuing along the same path, with more emphasis on diversifying my income streams on top of my current focus in my day job. I hope to have enough financial security in the near future to increase my charitable spending and also take a vacation once the borders are finally open. Until then, it's back to work and back to the charts for me. And that's all I have for you today. Another long video, but I hope it's an interesting one and inspires you to start or continue on your FIRE journey. Remember to focus on your own journey and not compare yourself to others. I'm pretty sure there are plenty of other people who are doing better than myself, but there are also plenty more who have had a much more difficult journey. It's always a good reminder to be thankful for what we have and to strive to be in a position to help others along with their journey. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!